Alright, what's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the second half of what I would want to be what I consider my dream Pokemon game. And today we're going to be discussing Gens 5 through 8 and the Pokemon that I would want from those generations. So let's just hop right on into this. So first up, we have the Unova region, Gen 5. And for the starter, I decided to go with Superior. Why? Well, mainly because he's a snake, and I believe that his movement and the control elements that he could bring forth would be a lot of fun. For instance, he could coil up and increase his movement to attack or wrap around his opponent. So I see him like almost acting like a spring, basically. Coils up and he's able to just shoot forward off to the side or straight at his opponent and then wrap up around them. Maybe tie them up some, just doing some stuff like that. Also, as a grass type, I think that, like with some previous grass types, I think him being able to control, like, literally just grass itself. I imagine him being able to, like, summon up vines, using the grass to, like, tangle up his opponents. And then, again, like I said, as a snake, I think just his movements capability would just be a whole lot of fun, and maybe make things a little bit more sneaky because he'd just be he'd be able to use a little bit of stealth and just be a slippery, sneaky snake and just confuse his opponent. Next up, we've got Galvantula. I think this is going to be a really fun one. As a spider type, or as not a spider type Pokemon, because there is no spider type Pokemon, but as a spider based Pokemon, I think that would bring forth a lot of fun. Just going with the same example that I've been using in the entire in both videos so far. String Shot, obviously, as a spider, I imagine him being able to use String Shot and it making sense. Again, like I've said before with the examples, using it to swing from point A to point B, be able to do, like, just move around. I also imagine him using kind of like setting out traps like Spider-Man, like a web mine almost, just to be able to, like, trap your opponents, stop them. Also just being, like I said, again, as a spider, I think him just being able to just, like, crawl up, maybe jump, because I imagine him almost like as a jumping spider, to where he can just jump from distance to distance, just like make your opponent just stay on their feet. Again, trapping your opponents, just acting as a spider, and then as an electric type, obviously he'd bring in his electric personality, being able to shock your opponent. And then, if they happen to get paralyzed, you can also wrap them up with, if you happen to have String Shot as one of your moves, they're paralyzed, you can wrap them up with String Shot and then just drag them around, or just think that again, a lot of this just comes down to what I think would be a really fun idea, and I think that Galvantula would be a whole lot of fun just being able to play around with them. Alright, so last up for Unova, we've got Excadrill. Now, why Excadrill? Well, in all honesty, I believe he would bring forth some very fun and very unique battlefield manipulations. I think that as almost a drill digging type or Pokemon, I imagine him like hopping into the ground, just moving around like that underneath the ground, and then just popping up to attack his opponent, or also just setting up different different entries and exits all around the battlefield, so that was, if you switched him out with a water type Pokemon, you can just flood the field a lot more, and then just creating holes to where your opponent just sinks in. Trapping or just shoot out from underneath them. So like if you dig underneath the ground and then you just like pop up, I just think that would bring forth some fun, unique strategies to where you could just, alright, like I said, you could cause a bunch of holes to pop out in the field, and if you bring in a water type Pokemon, you can then use Surf, for instance, and flood all the holes, or just unload the water into one hole and then just have it like slowly throughout the rest of the battle just come up, and then all of a sudden the battlefield just becomes a almost a swamp from all the water and the mud, all this other stuff, to where the opponent just like they have a hard time moving. And then again, say it's limitless from the way how I'm just imagining how Excadrill would work, but either way, it still would be, you'd be like, okay, I have an idea for how I want to do this and how I want to move around and trick my opponent and just see how things go. Alright, next up, we got Kalos, Gen 6, start of the region. We're going to go with Greninja. Now, why Greninja? Honestly, because he's the best starter for the region, and he's also a frog ninja. Do with that as you will. We're going to move on to the next one with Halucha. Now, I think that this would be just a fun, all-around brawler type Pokemon. The way how I imagine it going is just like giving him a special move to where, like, almost similar to Incineroar, like with his move Darkest Lariat and his Z move, because if I'm remembering correctly, the animations for that is just all of a sudden a wrestling ring pops out of nowhere, and then he just uses like Darkest Lariat against the tightropes. I just imagine Halucha just giving that move called, I'm just gonna say, let's just call it the ring, and all of a sudden, just in the battlefield, just like a wrestling ring comes in, and he just jumps off the turnbuckles and just like flying kicks and just power drives and all this other stuff, and it'd just be a lot of I just imagine him just like messing with his opponents, because the opponent's just like, what, why am I just moving on like a little trampoline wrestling ring, and here's Halucha just coming from the top rope, just like pow, just like smacking his opponent around until the, obviously the ring, in the way how I imagine it going, it would obviously get destroyed, because you're dealing with elemental forces, or you're dealing with monsters that can control the elements. So of course the ring's going to get burnt, or it's going to be destroyed by an earthquake. But I just imagine that Halucha goes first, he summons that ring, and he's just like, the opponent's just like, what's going on? And he just like, from the top rope, Irish whip, all this other fun stuff that I just think that it would be really interesting to see. And again, does it make sense? No, not at all. Why is there a wrestling ring just appearing out of nowhere? I don't know, but why not? It just seems like it'd be so much fun to be able to do that. And last for Unova, I decided to use Avalog. As an ice type, I think bringing in that sort of elemental control would be just, again, fun, a fun manipulator. It's water on the field, freeze it up. Is dig being used? The way how I imagine it is you could just freeze the hole. So if the opponent's still like in the process of moving, trying to dig the tunnels, I'd almost imagine like ice beam being used, causing the hole to freeze and the Pokemon just getting frozen and just trying to break through it. Or if you wanted to, I imagine Avalog being a bit slow to move around, because the way how he moves and looks, or the way how he looks, you just imagine it'd be slow. But it's almost 3 o'clock. Fuck me. Anyway, but I just imagine him, freezing a patch on the ground where he can just almost skate on it a little bit and have a little bit of a edge up on the movement, so that way he would just be like, okay, yeah, like I said, I'm not imagining him to be super fast on the ice, but going back to, I think, the Gastrodon example, like, let's say Avalog moves like 2 miles an hour, right? You freeze it, you get a little bit of ice patch, he moves that, goes 4, so it's not a super increase to the speed, but it's still enough to where it's just like you can kind of tell of a difference. So you can just like, all right, boom, get out the way, all this other stuff. All right, up next we've got Alola, and for the starter, he's already been mentioned just a minute ago. I picked Incineroar. Why? Well, it's kind of like the same with Halucha. The reason being is that he's based off a wrestler, and again, this goes back to Halucha. Just the idea of him summoning a ring like he does in his signature Z move, which is a malicious moonsault, and seeing him pull something like that, just the ring appearing out of nowhere, and then just like, if I'm thinking correctly, he's based off of the heel type wrestlers. So the bad guys in the wrestling, like back in the day, whenever I used to watch wrestling, almost like Randy Orton, the legend killer. I imagine him being something like that, just like talking some smack, just getting the opponent all riled up, and he's like, what'd you say? And then he just like Irish whips, or he almost like RKOs out of nowhere, just like just like boom, and then just all this other fun, like just like I said, I imagine him and Halucha almost being like grappler type base, to where you just like you take control of your opponent and you just force them to do what. And this goes back to like his signature move, Darkest Lariat. I almost imagine him doing a mixture of a lariat and also just like pile drive or choke slam, just different stuff like that. Or just be a very interesting way of doing this is if you choke slam and then all of a sudden you just use like fire blast on them while they're on, after they've been on the ground, and just like they've just been choke slammed to the ground. I think that would be kind of a dark but a really fun, just like unique way of taking the battle into your hands. Next up, we've got Palisand. Now, I picked him because the way how I imagine him being used is, and I don't know if you can use this in the actual games, but for sake of it's my dream game, so he can learn this move by God, and I don't care if it's not possible in your way. But I kind of imagine him, again, being a manipulator type Pokemon. He can use like double team. Like, let's say if you're in a sandy area, right? You can use double team, and all of a sudden here comes a bunch of Palisands. Well, guess what? You're in the sand. Double team's been used, and again, this is kind of almost based off of like anime logic. So instead of just like your evasion, obviously your evasion would be up, but that's just because there's like Shadow Clone Jutsu, a repeat of, they're always like clones. Excuse me. They're like clones all along the ground, so that's just going to cause some confusion to your opponent, because they're just like, oh, okay, there's let's say there's 6 Palisands now. You got to go and try and find out which one is the correct one. And the way I say is, you can either play it safe and just stay still and causing your opponent to move around, tire themselves out, using some moves against some of the fake ones, and all of a sudden, guess what? It just disappears because nothing happens. I also imagine you'd be able to, like, if you were smart enough and if you're careful enough about it, you could move Palisand, slowly away, so that way you can try to like counteract, be behind your opponent, and then hit it with just some sort of move to cause some damage. And like I said, you could just, or if you wanted to, you could play it safe to where all you're doing is you're just standing still, so that way as soon as the opponent comes up to you, you can just, if you should so choose to, you can more or less drop like the double team and then just straight up attack. Or like I said, you could try to move around, sneak around, and attack from behind, or you can just wait till he's right in front of you and attack you that way. And again, like I said, when it comes to like the sand, I think Palisand would be the perfect one to actually create like a quicksand type field. And I just like I said, I think someone really creative could come up with a really good strategy about how, like for instance, double team and with the sand being used. And last but not least for Alola, we've got Serena. or Serena. I think that's, I'm gonna call her Serena. I could be completely wrong, but it's Serena. Again, kind of going back to the superior example, I picked her mainly because of her grass typing. I think, again, like with Palisand, I think that she'd be a pretty good, fun manipulator on the field. You know, if, let's say, like if you're on like a semi-barren, land, like maybe let's say out in the desert, right, where there's not that much grass. I think with certain moves, you cause some grass to grow in the desert, right? And as a grass type, she would have full control over the grass, so she could use it to cause some vines to slow down your opponent, or trip them over, or wrap them up. She can then she can cause the grass to grow. Use like razor leaf, stuff like that. Again, like ingrain move that causes, the way how I imagine it's just like they literally just, the grass type Pokemon just literally just stands still, and it has roots come into them to help heal them. I think that by doing, she'd be able to do that, and I think that that would just be a fun, someone really creative could come up with a way of creating a grassy field to cause problems for your opponent. And again, even if she can't use these moves in the regular game, she can use them in this one. That's why I limited the list to this amount of Pokemon. She could you could come up with some really good combinations for like using moves like Stun or Sleep or Poison Powder, to where you're just like, okay, you know what? I'm going to cause this grass to grow. I'm going to cause like 3 different patches of grasses to grow, right? One's going to have stun powder with it. One's going to have sleep powder. One's going to have poison powder. So that way, no matter which way the opponent goes, they would have to fight through a status ailment. So you're just like, the opponent would be like, obviously the opponent would be kind of be able to say like, okay, that looks like that's going to be poison grass. So do I want to risk taking some amount of damage each turn, or do I want to see if I can go through and risk falling asleep, where I'm just going to, you're going to pass out almost immediately, and then the opponent's going to have a few free hits on you, or are you going to risk being paralyzed, to where you're just like, every time you go to try to move, you lock up and you're just not able to move. And so I just think by having that level of control would bring one, as you as the trainer would bring forth, so you're like, okay, I'm going to mess with this guy just to see what happens. And then if it's going against you, just like it brings into that selection. It's like, am I going to try to risk this, or do I have a Pokemon who will be able to counteract that? Like, for instance, let's say Incineroar or Charizard, or any of the other Pokemon, if they are able to learn a fire type move, it's just like, are you just going to try and burn it and hope for the best? Alright, so last up, we've got the Galarian. For the starter, I'm picking Inteleon. Honestly, I'm picking him mainly because of his theme as a spy type Pokemon. I imagine him just being like almost like a superior that how I mentioned earlier, just being stealthy, just depending on how the field is set up and what kind of terrain you're in. Like, obviously, if you're in a lake, I imagine him, he would have an advantage in that way by just diving into the water, going down, and just moving around, to where he's just like able to move around underwater, where he could pop up and just have a element of surprise. I almost imagine him just like, even if it's not water around, but it's like some really high grass, I almost imagine him like getting low on the ground and then just crawling, almost like I can't remember the name of the mission, but I think it's all gillied up from the original, I believe it's Modern Warfare 2 or 1, I can't remember, but the one where you're playing as a Captain Price and you're just sneaking through Chernobyl, just like with your mentor. I'm just like, I imagine him, Inteleon, being able to do something like that. Or in taking into consideration his special move, snipe shot, just, you know, if he could be lying on the ground and just like waiting, and as soon as his opponent crosses into his eyesight, snipe shot, or even climbing up a tree and just waiting in the tree, like if you're in like a little woody or a forest area, just like snipe shot. You know, again, going back to how I mentioned with the water aspect of it, I kind of imagine like, you know, it's something that I haven't really mentioned before, but I'm gonna say now. You know, I imagine like, you know, Gigantamax, and like Z, and Mega Evolutions would be included in this if they're able to do so. That's why I limited the list. And I know from what I've seen, his Gigantamax, he just gets like that giant like water tower. So like if you're in a giant body of water, that's how you're able to activate his Gigantamax form. He just shoots up into the air, and he's just like, just, you know, you being able to use snipe shot, if you have, you know, the ability to use it still, you're just able to snipe shot from up high and just pretty much have a bird's eye view of the battlefield. So second up, I decided to go with I believe this is our first variant Pokemon, but I decided to go with Galarian Rabbit Ash. And if I'm correct, I believe this is also the first fairy type. Honestly, as a horse, you know, horse-based Pokemon, I think that the traversal on the field would be kind of unique, because, you know, him galloping around the field, just attacking and going from there. I can almost see, like, the way how I imagine it being used is, for instance, you know, psychics, whenever you're imagining them using their mind and their hand, almost like Professor X, like you're just doing like this number right here. The way how I imagine it would be different with Galarian Rapidash is like his hooves, almost like a shockwave, right? So like let's say if you use the move Psychic, I imagine if you use the move Psychic and you're moving, what happens is that he just like, whenever he steps down, like let's say if he makes 4 steps, and on that 4th step, that's when like the Psychic shockwave comes out. So if I'm correct, Psychic always hits, but for the sake of this game, and the way how I'm saying it is, it sends out pretty much a literal Psychic shockwave from whenever he makes that last step. So you're just like, ugh, you just get blasted by it. Or if it's a Psychic type move, for instance, that has you have a chance to dodge it. Whenever he makes that last step, it sends it out as a Psychic, again, like a Psychic shockwave, so you have a chance to jump over the shockwave and just try to avoid any damage at all. Same with some of his fairy moves. You know, I've used him like a bit in the game, so I'm not super familiar with what his moveset could be. Like I got him at the very end of the game, whenever I was more focused on trying to fill out the Pokédex. So all of his moves and everything I'm not too familiar with. So like I said, some moves I imagine him sending out like a shockwave. Again, as a horse, I imagine him being really fast to move around the field. He has you know, imagine him jumping like a horse, barrel racing, or however you refer it to. I just think that would be, again, a lot of fun, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. It's just like, do I think this would be fun? Absolutely. That's why they're on this list, because I think that they would be a lot of fun. Alright, so last up for the Galar region, I'm going with Dragopold. As a ghost type Pokemon, I should say, excuse me, is I could see him going intangible, almost like Danny Phantom, and the way how I see it working is just, again, like with some of the ground types, you know, you go underneath the ground, you're able to move around, and then popping up, I imagine him being able to go literally straight through his opponent, to where it's just like, just send out really, you know, just vibes, because you just went straight through him. And then he turns around and goes, you know, becomes tangible again, and like because he's based off of like a fighter jet, just sends out those little his just attacks from then. I'd also just like, even like intangible going through stuff. I also imagine him going invisible, as a, because he's a ghost, to where you're just able to move around the field. Just able to move around. I guess invisible and intangible in the way how I'm describing it is pretty much the exact same thing. Again, kind of imagine, like I said, Danny Phantom, in the way how that would, how his powers and how he fights. This is almost how I imagine Dragopold working. And like I said, the way he does hover, and like I said with Metagross, because I actually want to bring up the fact that, like, yeah, while he is hovering, he would still be attacked. He would still be hurt by those ground type moves, unless he has the ability to levitate, which I don't think he naturally does, and I don't think he would have it in this game. He's still hovering, like, he's only hovering like this high off the ground, right? Like, let's say my mic, the top of my mic right here is the ground, right? I imagine Dragapult being like right about here. And so the way how I imagine, like, for instance, the move like Earthquake is, if he's right here, basically what happens is the ground goes up, and so he can get caught in that and cause some damage. And as a ghost type, the way how he can counter that by he's still going to get hit no matter what, but he has a chance of getting stuck like some of the other ones would. But as a ghost type, he's just able to, like, and then just like pop up, or just go through the spikes and then just go around and just try to cause some damage. Like I said, I think if you're really smart and you think about how, when and where to become intangible, would be really fun way to play around and mess with your opponent. Alright, and that does it for the second half of the Pokemon that I would have in my dream game. As always, let me know down below what you thought. Let me know what you thought about my list. What's a couple Pokemon that you would add to it, or did you like the list that I want? I'm thinking sometime in the future, because I don't want to have like strict, like I said, I don't want to, when it comes to the content on the channel, I don't want to just have spam a whole bunch of stuff. I want to take some breaks. I think in the future, probably in the next few weeks or so, depending on however I feel whenever I want to record, I might actually go into depth on like the categories of the Pokemon, because I brought up manipulation, I brought up speed, all this other stuff. I think I might want to just go in depth on what it is that I mean exactly by that, more so than I have in this. Have a little bit of chance to actually just sit down and think and just come up with all that other good stuff. Like I said, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, comment down below, let me know what you thought of the video. Hey, if you enjoyed it, share it with your friends. Hopefully they'll enjoy it too. And if I have that bell icon, hit that too, so that way you're notified for any and all future videos. But other than that, hey, I want y'all to have a great day. I will see y'all in the next video, and as always, be good, y'all.